Okay, hello and welcome everyone. So I'm going to talk about my poster, which is reflecting the results from my paper, Experiment Associations and Agricultural Innovation. Basic idea was the agricultural innovation was taking place at the university, and I studied two areas, in particular Wisconsin and Ontario, and then the goal was to be able to diffuse that information across the rest of, well, the province in the case of Ontario and the state in the case of Wisconsin. And so the basic idea, the basic problem was, well, the research in Wisconsin was taking place at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and in Ontario is taking place at the Ontario Agricultural College, which is now present-day University of Guelph. And the issue is there's kind of no reason to think, actually you might even be suspicious, that the results found at the experiment station would be relevant or be useful throughout the rest of the state or the rest of the province. So what they did was they created this network, this experiment association, this network of students who had graduated from the agricultural college in both places, and or other farmers who had gone back and had maybe spent a couple of weeks, maybe a month, with close instruction from the experimental researchers, kind of learning about the varieties, learning about new cultivation techniques, and then going to conduct research and experiments on their own plots. So ultimately what they're able to do is leverage their alum network to be able to say, hey, wait a second, we got really good results with this variety here in Guelph or in Madison. What happens if we try this somewhere else across the area? So what about Toronto? What about in Green Bay? What about in Milwaukee or Superior? And so the idea was then they could reconduct those experiments. They could try to replicate in other places across the state, places across the province, to determine whether a particular variety or a particular method was going to be useful widely throughout the region. And then ultimately the ones that were really successful then became useful and then disseminated beyond the state and then through other places in Canada, through Michigan, through Minnesota from the Wisconsin Experiment Association, and so on. So that was the idea. Now what I'm doing in my paper is I'm saying, all right, well, let's look at what's happened. So for instance, let's look at what happened for Ontario, and I've got a similar chart for Wisconsin, and I'm basically trying to ask the question of, can we determine some effect on crop yields through these experiments associations? And this is difficult because, like, here's just sort of the raw crop yield data goes up and down. Now, some of the things that are happening is we're not getting, just looking at that chart, you don't get the ceteris paribus analysis because we're getting differences in rainfall, different things in supply and demand conditions, swapping between other crops. And so basic idea is, like, can we separate out, can we determine through these crop yields, like for corn, for oats, and through barley, some of the main crops that these associations were working on, can we discern whether there was an effect? So basically what I'm trying to do is determine a relationship between the presence of members and then crop productivity. And the idea was we should expect that if these associations were useful, there should be some effect, possibly a lagged effect, of the presence of these members, such that if you have more people spreading this knowledge, so in two directions, both from the research station to local farmers, also from local farmers about their fields back to researchers in the station. If you've got this sort of information flow, the more that you're able to reach the network into the particular county, for instance, I've got county level data, the higher yields we might expect. Right, so like I said, I've got county level annual data from Wisconsin over this time period, and then from Ontario from this time period. My linear regression looked like this. So I had, of course, intercept, and then I've got the number of experimenters in a particular county in a particular year. Then I've got the lagged number of experimenters, once lagged, twice lagged, with the idea being there's probably some cumulative effect. Also, the number of experimenters that I have this season probably isn't as relevant for this season as it is for next season, because people will learn, the knowledge that we learn this year will apply in the future, is the idea. So, and then I had this variable, this vector that was bringing in other types of things, such as thinking about soil precipitation, other things we might want to be able to control for. Weather effects, this was county fixed effects, this was time fixed effects, and then like the air term. All right, and I had, let's see, standard errors clustered on the counties, like econometric stuff that we won't worry about for now. And then in terms of the results, well, I found that a 1 standard deviation increase in the number of association members increased oat yields the following year for Ontario and the following year for Wisconsin, actually a similar effect. And the effect tended to occur in crops that figured most prominently in the activities of the association, which is actually kind of really important for my story, which is like I did the same regression over a whole collection of crops, such as ones that were more minor or that hadn't actually received a whole lot of research focus from either association, and we didn't see any increase in those, right? The measurable effect was for the crops that were really important, both in terms of what they were sort of actively trying to disseminate, what they're talking about, what appeared in the agricultural journals. And so this is what I'm talking about, like anecdotal evidence suggests support for the main conclusion, suggests success with oats and less so with barley. This then led to sort of another sort of research aim that I'm working on, which is specific to a particular strain of barley that was really useful for brewing, and it was the brewing industry in particular needed to have a really uniform crop. It was really bad if you had like your carload, your train load of barley, such that it would like sprout at different times. You had to kind of sprout at the same times. That'd be useful for brewing beer. Beer industry was really important, in particular in Wisconsin and around Milwaukee. And so this is one of the sort of major influences on actually the direction of research and kind of guiding them towards thinking about barley as opposed to like some other crops. Anyway, so yeah, optimally one variety would be grown uniformly in a region. And yeah, so that's what I've got here. I'll go ahead and conclude. I'm going to drop this into the Google file, and then I'll watch for yours. So.